So usually when we do these panels at Disrupt, there's drones flying around, and it's loud and exciting, and we always hope that nobody dies. This panel is nothing like that. This is pure business. We'll still try to make it as exciting as we can, but don't expect flying drones and fireworks here. So we've got on stage with us, we've got Chris from SkyFutures. We've got Jay Bregman from Verifly, and Buddy Michini from Airware. And just to get started, because I think most people don't know your companies quite yet, if Chris, if you want to just introduce your company quickly, and we'll just go down for just a few.
Good morning, everyone. SkyFutures, we are a drone and a data collection business. We work in one market, and that's the oil and gas market. We work all over the world using drones to inspect anything from oil platforms to oil refineries. But the focus is on collecting the data and using that data to do things like predicting points of failure. So that's a bit of an overview of us. Jay?
So you're actual drone users, which is...
Yeah, we're drone users, but we focus on the sensors to capture the data and the software there to interpret the data. So the ability to trend forecast, to layer up data sets, and then really add value to the old clients. So removing human beings from the loop and using robots instead.
So Verifly is about assessing and addressing the massive pool of risk that is created by both consumer and recreational drones. So we have a very complex geospatial map of the world listing all of the hazards and various risks, both regulated and non-regulated, all around the world. And we have our first consumer product that we're launching next year.
And Airware is making a hardware, software, and cloud platform for commercial drones. So the sort of brains of the drones, the hardware that goes on the actual vehicle that supports the sensors and applications, the ground control software that enables the operator to interact with the system, and then the sort of cloud connective tissue that connects the drone system to the various planning and data management workflows for various companies. So a platform that's trying to support applications.
Thank you. Now, everybody knows what a selfie drone is good for. When you guys are working, when you're going out talking to potential customers, what kind of use cases are they bringing to you? And if you want to start, Buddy.
Sure. Yes, it's a huge variety of use cases, anything from land management to sort of wildlife management, into mostly the inspection of infrastructure, so either residential inspection, inspection of utilities and power lines, things like cell phone towers and bridges, basically things that are difficult or dangerous to do with humans. Drones offer a new perspective and in a lot of ways can do it more scalably and a lot safer and with better sort of cost.
Are you seeing the same kind of use cases at Verifly as well?
Well, so we view the world slightly differently, which is there's about 4 million drones in the world right now. Of that, only about a couple tens of thousands are in commercial use. That is actually used for any of the use cases that have just been described. The remaining 99% are used by consumers. They're bought in the Apple Store or Best Buy or other kinds of places, and their primary use is imaging. I want to take pictures of myself, my family, or basically others on my vacation or in my backyard or whatever it is. And so there may be other use cases, but right now that's where the market stands.
For you guys, the use case is pretty clear, so we don't need to talk about that really. But talk to me about why you focus so much on oil and gas and not on inspections of wind turbines, for example.
In our early days, we looked at a whole range of markets. As everyone does in the commercial drone world, there are many, many markets you can use this technology to add value. So you can make things safer, cheaper, faster. And the same for Buddy, it's about the data. We decided to pick one market, so find one market where we can understand the problems they have and understand the problems that can be solved using drone technology. So we picked oil and gas. It's a big market. It's a global market. There's a lot of money in it. And there's also a real push to remove humans from the dangerous parts of oil and gas. So we focused on the inspection part of oil and gas, where you have guys typically hanging on ropes over the side of an oil platform trying to collect data. And that's a crazy way of collecting data. So our view was there's a much better way, and that's using drones.
When we're talking about collecting data, It sounds like for the most part we're talking about imaging still, but are you seeing people use more sophisticated sensors? Do you use more sophisticated sensors?
Yeah, we build our own sensors. So your basic imaging has enormous value in that you're taking a picture of a structure, and then you're looking at what that structure is saying to you, you're analyzing it, and you're using information, whether it's corrosion or cracks. If you're layering up a crack over the period of 6 months, you can tell someone that crack's growing at a rate of 5% month on month. That adds value. But we've developed lasers for laser measurement, airborne gas sensing, and a whole host of other data collection devices.
What's Airware? You guys have a whole platform for these things.
Sure, yeah. There's lots of different types of imaging sensors. So EO imaging, infrared, multispectral is really important for agriculture. And one of sort of tying into what Chris said, the ability to collect this data more frequently, time over time, gives you the ability to sort of do change detection and time series analysis. So adding sort of a new dimension to the actual imaging itself brings a lot of power to the data.
Got it. One thing I've been trying to understand is how big this market actually is right now for commercial drones. And it feels like we do hear a lot about it, but what are you actually seeing in inbound interest? Verifly, that might be a little bit different, I guess, right? But what are you seeing? Because you're working with DJI and similar, with OEMs,
both consumers and enterprises. But yeah. So look, our view of the market is that it is still predominantly a dominated consumer market. DJI, if you look at its curve, it's 250 million, 500 million. They'll do $1 billion in sales this year. They pretty much dominate both the consumer market as well as if you look at the people who are getting accredited to fly commercial drones. Most of them are using either the consumer or prosumer models of people like DJI. So, that's still, it's still a large market. And there's still places like the United States where it is very cumbersome to get a license to legally become a commercial user. And I think some of these guys have gone through that process.
Sure.
Yeah, and that's, right now the consumer drones are sort of dominating the market. And I think one of the reasons is that it's drone technology is not very approachable for large companies this is a very new tool for them. And a flying robot is a scary prospect. So a lot of our time is spent not only on the sort of cool, robot data collection part, but also on all the things on either end of that. So tying in the planning infrastructure with the current human-based model, and then managing all the data that you collect. These things can collect a ton of data, managing that data and organizing it, making sure it's safe, and then on top of that, making sure all the regulatory and compliance pieces fit together, which again is not approachable right now. Sure. But tying all those things together in one big platform so that an enterprise can sort of use it and collect data just like they're using with a laptop or a spreadsheet is sort of our goal.
Chris, you're actually going out and trying to sell to enterprises. You've been doing it for a while too. What are some of the challenges when it comes to try to convince these companies to go with drone technology?
I think Buddy remarked on the main one, which is it's a flying robot. And you're trying to get these pretty established, fairly conservative industries to move from using humans to suddenly using robots. And it's trying to educate them that the transition is safe, that the technology works, that there is value in the technology. So I think one of the biggest things we've had to do in the years we've been operating is actually spend a lot of time educating people. And there's a generational issue here as well. Sort of the older generations who are less tech savvy, maybe slightly fearful of the technology or prefer the older, tried and tested methods of people. But the younger generation, it's an easy win. So there's education, and there's also trying to find that entrepreneur in that enterprise and targeting that person and getting them to buy into the value that you bring.
Jay, you used to be at the CEO of Halo. Most people probably here know Halo. You decided to move over to do drones a year and a half ago or so, right? Always felt to me like Halo was trying to be like the good Uber, following the regulations, working with licensed drivers and black cars. Now you're doing Verifly, where you're also working pretty much on making sure everything is safe and licensed and just keeping everything in compliance. So I want to talk a little bit about regulations, and I think you probably have a pretty good idea there. But what's the regulation situation like right now if you look at the worldwide spectrum?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, look, so our view on this is, first of all, our business doesn't depend on it. So unlike the taxi model where the regulations are city by city and do matter in terms of what you can and can't do, it hasn't really been a barrier for somebody like us. But we view this market as, frankly, the next car. Right, so the car is pretty much the only other consumer product that can cause harm to people, but also has mass market appeal. And if you look at the evolution of cars, it's instructive. So cars are basically invented in the late 1800s. In 1903, which is actually in the UK, they are first required to be registered, and then they become mass market in 1913 with the Model T, and then in 1930 there's compulsory insurance, and then they become really part of the mainstream and go from there. And so if you look at drones, they're invented in 2006, and they weren't really used until probably 2011, 12, 13. And then you get compulsory registration, which is happening right now. As of the end of this year, you will have to register your consumer drone or a commercial drone in the US, Ireland, as well as several other countries which are going to follow suit. And we believe, it will continue on that path to a mass market product and be regulated in pretty much the same way. So we're just kind of betting on that and trying to work around where that's going to go.
Sure. And one of the interesting bits is that, unlike the initial sort of car regulations, there's already a whole suite of regulations for manned aviation. And so one of the tensions is to try to turn those regulations into something more palatable for UAVs, where the risk models are extremely different. And finding that sweet spot on the spectrum between no regulation, which is as bad as too much regulation. And some of the work right now is trying to find that middle ground to make drones obviously safe, priority one, but also enabling companies and sort of young entrepreneurial companies to enter the space.
Sure. What does that middle ground look like, though?
It's, I mean, there are already countries that are sort of implementing this. France is a great model where there are common sense regulations in terms of how far the drone can be from the operator, how big the drone can be, what types of operations they can do. And the latest sort of FAA proposed small UAS rule largely mirrors that. And it is a nice middle ground. You don't, for instance, you don't have to have a pilot's license, but you do need to have knowledge of airspace, right? Because this vehicle is in the airspace. So it's somewhere between those two.
Jay, maybe you can take this one. How far away do you think we are from actually integrating drones into the overall airspace system, where they can interact with the regular planes that are flying around in the air as well? Well,
look, I mean, I think before we can even get to that question, we have the issue of incidents that are going to become increasingly common. And what I didn't say about the car example is, if you look at the House of Lords debate about the Road Traffic Act of 1930, the reason why they put in place compulsory insurance is because there were tons of accidents. People were running away from scenes, hospitals were being left with a bill, et cetera, et cetera. We're starting to see the same sort of thing with drones. In the UK very recently, there was a case where somebody, well-meaning, was flying a drone in their backyard, hit a tree, it bounced into their neighbor's yard and took out the 18-month-old neighbor's child's eye. And basically there's no insurance in place for any of that to happen. So that person could potentially be wiped out. Until that problem is solved, I don't think it is possible to even contemplate airspace integration, because that person, if it wasn't a toddler, it could have been a plane, right? So, right. Until there is something in place to basically assess the risk in the market can't really evolve. It's like basically saying, how are we going to build highways before we can build roads?
Should we have compulsory insurance for drones?
I think it's inevitable. I mean, and I think it already is in place in Europe for, for most countries for commercial users. And where it's not compulsory, people need to have it for, like Chris does, because their clients demand it. And I think for consumers as well, it will become, mandatory because, look, this is a product that can hurt somebody else. It's mostly safe, but at the same time, you need to be able to be protected, not for yourself, but for the other person.
Now, Chris, you work in a lot of different countries, so you see a lot of different regulations. You're probably insured all around the world, and is that something you have to do in most countries at this point, or is it something, as Jay said, that your employees basically, or your employers want from you, your clients want from you?
But I think it's a bit of two things. It's personal responsibility to my brand as a company. I also work in a highly regulated market, oil and gas. We're flying an aircraft around a multi-billion-dollar asset. So if that was to fly into something and stop that oil platform producing, then my sort of $20,000 drone has caused a massive incident. So yeah, from a sort of company protection point of view, absolutely. But I suppose coming back to Jay's point, though, about consumers and whether there needs to be insurance there, actually, I think it's about people taking responsibility for their own toys, their own drones, from the consumer side of life. I don't necessarily think someone wants to spend $500 on a drone and then spend $500 on insurance. It might have a really negative impact on the market. And you're always going to have people with nefarious intent in terms of taking a drone to spy on their neighbor when they're sunbathing or something. But the rules are there to prevent the 99% of us doing something silly. And I'd say with some form of reasonable legislation, those 99% will act in an honorable and decent way when operating these systems.
Yeah, but if someone takes out my toddler's eye and I sue them and they have no insurance policy and their homeowner's policy won't cover it, then what then? I'll take all the assets that the person has, but that's not a very efficient market.
And I would say a large part of this is education. So, using these things, this is a flying object that is potentially dangerous. And I think maybe the sort of prevailing view right now, especially on the consumer side, is that these are just toys. And in fact, these are very sophisticated toys that you need to take a lot of care in operating them. So I think once that sort of mindset starts to take cultural precedent, then we'll see that the 99% using these things.
Well, that mindset is being pushed by the fact that you're being given an iPad and told, well, they're selling the system on the basis that this is the easiest thing to operate. You don't need any skills. You literally press a button, off it goes. So whilst I agree with what Buddy says, actually the market itself is pushing onto the consumer a system that doesn't need any sort of skills or aviation mindset.
But that's what the car market pushes right now. The car market, if you look at how they sell cars, it is the easiest car to drive, and even it drives itself, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, and yet still, no matter how safe you are and how, well-intentioned you are, there are accidents because there are a lot of cars. I believe, and I think we all believe, that the drone market will grow exponentially, continually over the next couple of years, which will mean there will be more drones than cars, and that's where you get these kind of problems inevitably.
Do we all agree that registration, at least, is something useful? In the US, we have a situation right now where you don't have to register your guns, but you will have to register your drones. So that's a different issue, probably. But is there use for this whole movement towards registration, at least?
Well, I think it comes back to the whole layered approach. If you have something in place to ensure that people sign up to something, it's a level of prevention. So even if you have to put in your name, your address, your mobile phone number, and email address, it's giving you that sort of sense that you have responsibility for this and that your data is with someone who can action against you if you behave inappropriately. Yeah. So I think it should be something that becomes the norm for consumers and professional users.
Our view is that it is basically the first step in a consumer-regulated market. You need to know where everything is, and you need to label it so that basically when a drone crashes into your backyard and just causes some damage, you can basically say, give it to the police and say, here's the drone, and they can look up and say who it is, and there can be responsibility apportioned properly, not like the Wild West that we have today.
With Airware, you're pretty much building the operating system to avoid all of these issues, right? I just want to talk about the tech for a moment as well here. What is it that you are doing to make all of this maybe a little bit easier for the drone industry, and what is it that can come in the future as well to make it easier?
A lot of it is sort of common sense safety that's built into the system. So for instance, having to register a geofence or a flight plan before as sort of not only a regulatory policy, but maybe your own company's policy says that this flight needs to go through an approval process so that more eyes are on it. And we can build that in since we have sort of an end-to-end platform. Those are the types of safety features that we can put in at the beginning that will prevent you from just taking up your drone and flying it wherever you want. And tying that in with the regulatory and insurance companies as well, which we can do with a cloud platform now. So that in the future we're envisioning that the sort of regulatory agency, the FAA, has a cloud sort of endpoint that you can hit and say I'd like to fly I'd like to fly this drone here, and use instantaneous feedback in terms of whether that's allowed or not. And that's already happening sort of at the research level in the United States with the NASA UTM project. But those are the kinds of things that we can build into the system so we can sort of ensure safety. Sure.
Now, we've talked about regulation quite a bit. I want to talk about something slightly more sexy. Amazon just released its annual or biannual, I don't know what the cadence is at this point, drone delivery video, and we just can't get around that. So I just want to take maybe, I don't know, Buddy, maybe you want to take this one first. Is this just marketing on Amazon's side, or is there something real here? Is drone delivery actually something possible?
Sure. I mean, there are places where drone delivery makes a lot of sense in countries where, with underdeveloped infrastructure, where medical things need to be delivered expeditiously. Drone delivery off the bat makes a lot of sense. A lot of the thing that we focus on is ROI. So I mean, does this make sense monetarily for your company? And we've spent a lot of time proving that out for different use cases. And that's with reference to sort of package delivery, it's a very technologically challenging problem. As if you've seen the video,
oh, yeah.
you know that right off the bat. And it's also uncharted territory in terms of integrating this very complex system into an already complex delivery system. And so I think a lot of thinking needs to be done around, is this going to make financial sense? And does this make technological sense at the current time?
Jay, you're looking at me like...
Well, yeah, no. So it's funny because my first business, eCourier, which is now part of Royal Mail Group and operates in London, was a same-day delivery business that was technology-enabled. And I can tell it would have been great to have backups or long-distance drones to be able to deliver things or miss routes or things like that. So I deeply empathize with what Amazon is trying to do, and I think they're very serious about it. Certainly from a regulatory perspective, they have some great people, that are ex-pilots and ex-pilots association people that are working on it. I think the biggest problem that they will face is airspace management. So, they're going to ultimately have to share the same airspace as all of the recreational users, and there is currently no way to deconflict that, that airspace. And so either they will have to get a corridor of airspace for themselves at the expense of everybody else, which a lot of people are very upset about and won't do, or they're going to have to get another corridor of airspace, which is going to be a really difficult thing because then it starts bleeding into manned aviation.
Right. Chris, you're flying drones every day. Do you see delivery as a possibility in the near future?
I think if you look at passenger jets, we're almost already flying on drone passenger jets. Your Airbus is, the guy at the front isn't a pilot. He's a computer controller. He's a systems monitor. So, yeah, I think it's inevitable. I mean, Jay highlighted a number of regulatory and technology issues we need to circumvent to get there, but I think it's simply a matter of time. It's a war of attrition, but it's not far away.
What time frame do you think we're talking about?
I think technology and regulation offer two entirely different time frames.
I mean, Amazon is talking about doing the first deliveries in the UK next year. So
yeah, because the UK has easier regulation.
For
them. What's coming next for drones? What's the big kind of topic right now that people are discussing in the drone ecosystem? What are you looking forward to? What are some of the technologies you're still missing in your work, Chris?
I suppose for us, it's that iterative step towards total autonomy, that entire removal of the human from the process. We are end-to-end. We're data capture, data process, data delivery. And for us, it's about removing the human from that entire process.
All right, Jay?
So I think from my perspective, if you look at the drone market right now, the only ways to really make money are you either become an OEM or a partial OEM or an operator. And yet, if you look at most evolved hardware markets, software is where, and this is probably all of the businesses that are represented in this room, is where most of the money is. So I think we're going to see software take a greater role in the drone economy, and therefore more businesses, and it to be more accessible to more people.
Yep.
You're trying to build all of this, so you must have an opinion.
I mean, we're really excited about autonomy, too, because it's one of the key factors that's going to allow the technology to really scale into the commercial world. And really, we were most excited about using drones just like companies use laptops. And so when someone says we need a drone for this, it's not a crazy idea at all. It's already something that's proven and can be used off the bat. So that's the future that we're looking forward to.
All right, maybe next time we're here, we'll just have autonomous drones without screens on it. You just don't have to be here. All right, thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.